Hello everyone, welcome to beautiful Gelvin Valley. We're in the middle of harvest here with our rented case. And I think we can safely hire him now that we've, well, at least until we get towards the middle of the field, we've extricated ourselves from most of the obstacles. Oh, you know what? I suppose there's really no reason I couldn't drive him, but for the time being, maybe what I can do is haul. Yeah, this was kind of a... Let me get on my beacons and haul the trailer down the road. As we've expressed before, we have a much larger combine than what we are used to using for harvest, so it means some of the fields we are leaving behind. And we're going to have to get a small combine in here anyhow, so doing the best we can. I did some odding work off cam, and I hope to be sharing that at some point in here. Last time I talked about it has to do with where we dump the grain when we're taking it to storage. And I described I think the term is a moving plane. It's where, and this happens in real life when you dump grain or anything into a pit. And there's a grain handling system that is taking it out of the pit, either with an auger or some kind of conveying system to get everything out of there. A lot of times the conveying part takes longer than you'd like, so when you dump it in the pit, sometimes it fills the pit and it spills over the top and some of those kinds of things. So to mimic it, actually, let me hold on here. Maybe I will put it up here. Maybe when I get out, is this a right angle to? Yeah, I think that's a right angle to put the header in there. Sure. Turn things off. Anyway, the game has code to handle that, and so I just wanted to also depict it in game if I could. I think last time I mentioned a script that I had written, a Lewis script. It's in game, but the in-game one, all it will allow for is a static plane. And for example, right now we are harvesting canola. And what I wanted was to have the plane that rises or falls in the pit to show the particular crop, that's being dumped in there. And the way it's set up now, you can only have a single kind of pit. So of course, where it was implemented, I think I mentioned the Riverside map, Farming Simulator 11. This is where I first discovered it. And I don't know why the Giants, they put the capability in their coding to do it, but then they themselves didn't implement it on the map. And maybe it's because of the reason I'm mentioning, where they knew it wouldn't look realistic. Oh my, we're close to a power line. If they knew it wasn't going to look realistic, then maybe, they were reluctant to fully implement it. Plus, it's a little bit more physics, so, I don't know. Maybe it comes at a performance cost. So, what I had previously done was create a number of different planes, and I just found a map where I had implemented it before, stole it off of there, stole the planes, the script, and I think, fingers crossed, I have it working. The only thing I need to do is, of course, fill a truck in order to prove it that it is working, in game here. So hopefully at some point we'll be taking a truck down there and have opportunity to see it work. Almost full. I'm going to need to go get the truck. And it's one of those satisfying fixes too, where Lua is just a great, language to help, with something like this, where you use an existing bit of code in the game, and then you just tweak it, add to it a little bit, and add the part that you want to add without having to figure out all the details. Because this is something where multiplayer syncing is involved. So if someone was dumping it into the pit, if you were in multiplayer, the other player could watch the plane come up, not just the person doing it. So there's all sorts of considerations, and I'll just leave him there. Head to the combine. We're almost ready again. Oh, I must have hit the higher button. Well, I still think I'd like to do it. I could just save a little bit of money. Put my pipe in. So I know we're having to mess around here a little with the harvest, where I'm going to have to come back, retrace steps, do it with a smaller combine. But I gotta say, it is going way quicker using this thing than it ever did, with the smaller one. I don't even remember what my header width is. Quite a bit more, I'm sure. I don't even know how much more. Yeah, it doesn't even show in the info in the upper left just how full the truck is. Wonder why not? Maybe because it's not running. Come on, get down. There we go. Yeah, I don't know how many more loads, so it may not even be this particular episode that I'm able to go show the moving plane, and I for sure won't have time to show the modding behind it. And frankly, I don't know how much interest there is in that kind of thing. I am always learning something new. I'm kind of curious here. I see a rental contract for something on the Tuuringer map, and I'm a little curious as to why it's popping up in here. That's kind of interesting. Oh well. Hopefully that doesn't mean I'm paying for Tuuringer assets in here. Alright, we now have a electrical thing to navigate around. This would be done very carefully in real life without doing what I just did, namely crash into it. Yeah, this is where, I had talked at one point of coming in with a small planter and kind of planting some grass kind of around the edge. And I think what I may have to do instead is take the map into the editor and do it in there. Because I'm afraid if I use even the narrowest little... Of course, if I replanted grass, I could expand it just a wee bit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm giving that some thought. Of course, going into the editor is probably cheating, but I was just in the editor, putting in something with a little bit more realism, so... Oops. How did I not get it down? There we go. In the last episode... Oh, here we're doing this again. Field is enough angles. It's messing with a flat header. But last time I also mentioned that I caught everybody up on the story I told about, the neighbor's cattle getting out. They mixed in with my father's cattle, and he had the mobile slaughter come out and take care of them, and along with a couple of his own cattle. And you know what? Let me try to cut this bend off. And it made me think, and some of this is probably cultural, how we were all raised, what our personal opinion is on what is fit to eat versus what isn't. And I'm sure there's a broad range, of people listening or people who play. I would suspect probably the most people who play farming sim are probably not going to be vegetarians, vegans, but honestly, I really don't know. Maybe there are some of them out there, and they may have various reasons. I know there is a fair segment of society that for animals' rights, and they choose it as they don't eat meat for moral reasons or whatever their reason is, but I would guess probably by and large the majority of people playing farming sim have no trouble eating meat. And the reason I bring that up is, it's always a clash between town and country. I think I've mentioned this before. When I went to school, we lived in the country, and we went to a town school, and at least for high school, middle school, that kind of thing. And the district grabbed just a little slice of the country, and so which included our home. And so most of my peers at school, that I interacted with, very few knew anything about the country. It was just stuff in town or whatever. So they had a totally different perspective, than what I grew up in. And I still remember, it's just one of those things, that you just remember because it just so stands out, where we were having lunch in high school, and the group of friends that I had lunch with, somehow we got on the topic of eating animals, and one of my friends said, he couldn't understand how we could butcher our own, or take to the slaughterhouse, our cattle, which my father did routinely growing up, mainly to feed his family. And when you raise your own animals, you at least know what went into the animal, and sometimes more importantly, what did not go into the animal, in terms of what it was fed, as to whether it's healthy and some of those things. And so we always had cattle around. Every year my dad would butcher some, and we would turn it into hamburgers, steaks, meat, whatever for the house. And so my friends were saying, basically asking the question, well, how can you just butcher your pets, take them in there to have them killed? And I remember as a kid, the question just baffled me from a couple perspectives. One, we never saw the cattle as our pets. I mean, I have a couple dogs now, and I would never take them off. I'd have to be so hungry, I don't even want to think about it before I would eat our dog or dogs or cat. I mean, that's to me what a pet is. And so we never saw the cattle really as pets. I mean, they made it sound like we were out riding our pets, and I guess occasionally we would name them, but that just isn't how we saw them. And let me see here, where am I? All right, he's down over there. Maybe I'll turn this way. But then secondly, and this sticks out in particular, is, and maybe he was just asking from the perspective of pets, because at the same time he was eating a turkey sandwich. So maybe it was just he was meaning pets. Maybe he didn't have anything against eating meat, although I thought he had said something about that at some point. I don't recall anymore. But that part sticks out to me. I just remember thinking that he was a hypocrite, because how could he sit there eating meat, if he was getting on my case for eating cattle, which seemed perfectly normal to me, in terms of how I grew up. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's had that experience. It's a common joke among farming communities, to encounter people. And yes, there are literally people out there that are this uneducated, that believe, why do we need farmers when we get all of our food from the store? And I mean, it's just a travesty that our education system is so poor that it turns out people who don't understand, where their food comes from. That's just tragic in so many ways, and just wrong. But that's kind of a whole nother story to get into. And then I think I had a couple friends who were also vegetarian or whatever. They just didn't eat meat. And I gotta say, every vegetarian, vegan person that I've come across, I don't want to say that they look unhealthy. They're usually very thin, and maybe it's just lack of all that animal fat. I really don't know, but they tended not to be people who were muscular in stature, that kind of thing. And honestly, some of them just didn't even look all that healthy. But yeah, what do I know? That's just kind of what my eyes tell me. And hey, I mean, if you're someone who doesn't eat meat or whatever, hey, more power to you. I don't particularly care about that. It's just my own observation. I would say even to this day. What I miss sometimes about those old days is having friends, with differing opinions, where you could get that shared and you could still be friends. It seems anymore, my word, if someone thinks differently from you, you unfriend them on Facebook. People are just rabid about it, and it's just kind of unfortunate. It's like we've lost our ability to share different ideas with each other, and seem to want to only be with people who think exactly like how I think, But we had a lot of that. We never had hogs. We occasionally had some chickens at home, and probably 2 times I can recall, maybe 3, where we butchered chickens. We got some broilers. We always had some chickens around that were layers. We didn't butcher the layers, of course. but butchering chickens, I mean, that's kind of a whole nother level. You really got to be set up for it. And yeah, it's a bloody exercise, when it comes right down to it. I mean, I know the way we did it is, the heads would come off, you would drain the blood, basically the chicken upside down. Chickens have all sorts of reflexes in them, so often they were still hopping and carrying on even without a head. And again, I'm sorry if that sounds gruesome. I don't ever lightly take a life, even of an animal. To me, there's just my own personal philosophy. There has to be a good reason for it. But that's how we did it. I don't know if there's a more humane way of going about it or not. But the work for it, I mean, then you got to deal with all the feathers. And I'm sure way back in the day, there was, a purpose for the feathers. Maybe they put them in beds, in pillows, whatever. Well, of course we don't do that anymore. So you take the head off, you got blood all over the feathers and everything, feathers sticking to meat. And I know one time when we butchered them, we just skinned the chickens. There are machines, that will take the feathers off. I think typically, the procedure was you would dip the chicken in a vat of hot water, boiling water. I think maybe that helped loosen the feathers. There was a machine that would pluck them, and then you would be able to keep the skin. But one of the times, we just went straight into skinning. The feathers came off, with the skin, and we just tried to keep it out of the meat. But it's really a lot of work for, I won't say very little reward. It's, and I don't know how they do it commercially. It'd be interesting sometime to get a tour of, a factory or something where they do this. Although, probably as I say that now, probably would never want to eat a chicken ever again, if I saw what was going on there. I have been in a slaughter facility for cattle and for hogs, but never for chickens. But surely they have something in there that makes it much more efficient. And as a family, we did much more butchering, I think, of beef and particularly pork on our own. My grandfather had a meat cutting room. This would be up on the Lone Oak farm. He had a meat cutting room kind of right next to the shop. He had a cooler, where you could hang the carcass for a while. He had a bandsaw in there. In later years, he had some other equipment, sausage, or a meat grinder, so you could make hamburger. There was a big old mixer for making sausage mixes. You'd have a lot of ground meat, and years ago we would mix it by hand, and that's just exhausting to do all that, and it was very handy, to have a machine do it. Of course, you had to be careful. The machine would take your arm off, if it got in there. But we tended to do those kinds of animals. I don't know that we ever took the chickens up there. Chickens were usually done, at home on site. So typically it was pork or beef, that we would do up there. And Grandpa had all the charts and everything we needed to know how to cut them up and that kind of thing. I remember one time, I was in the Midwest, we were visiting family. There was, and we participated in some chicken butchering there. There was a gentleman that knew how to get a chicken to squawk after it was dead. There was a certain way he could squeeze it and pump its legs, and anyway, I guess you'd have to be there. Most of what, I didn't drop it again. Most of what I remember doing up at my grandfather's was probably making sausage. Very common activity. And we have a family recipe, kind of discovered by accident. when I say accident, years ago they dumped way more quantity of a particular ingredient in than they were intending, and then they discovered, hey, this is actually pretty good, so they kept the recipe as is. Oop. Alright, put the pipe out. Oops. Turning downhill when I should be heading uphill. But the sausage was a mixture of venison and pork. I think the ratio we typically tried to shoot for was 60% pork, 40% venison, or roughly 2/3, 1/3, I think was even better. Deer meat, which we hunted here locally. A lot of people in my family are avid hunters, and you know something? This is almost full. Are we gonna make it? I don't know. Might be close. Trouble is, I'm getting down to... yeah. Alright, let me head back here. Oops. Oh, I gotta take it off the brake if I want it to move. Yeah, so each fall, and I grew up doing this, I don't hunt anymore. I don't got anything against it per se. The deer around here breed like rabbits and can be a nuisance, you know, to people's gardens and whatnot. So, now how did that turn it off? Oh, that's what it was. But anyway, in the fall is typically when they're hunted, and so usually oh, I'm yeah, we got this again with this header. Flat header sitting on the ground. There we go. That's when the deer would get caught, so probably tail end of October, November-ish is when we would have a deer or two. Someone would get them. We'd all share the meat. Of course, the deer, everything needs to be boned out, so that was the first order of business, cleaning the meat off the carcass. Eventually, when we had it all deboned, you know, it'd be ground up. The pork would also be ground up. There's that Turinger thing again. What the world? Anyway, I have a feeling I'm paying for it, you know, and that particular mod, the thing that bugs me about it, the rental mod, is it isn't open source. It's all closed up tight. So if it is forcing me to pay for something over on my Turinger save, I can't go in and fix it. Anyway, so it would take a couple evenings, and then I think we would set up a day on a Saturday or something where a whole bunch of hands would come together and we'd make sausage, and you know, we typically would put it in links, although it's usually one long link. You know, the casing for traditional sausage, I think they have synthetic casing available now, but I think the stuff we used back in the day was just a good old hog intestine. I think that's where it would come from. So they had equipment where we could, once we had all the sausage and everything mixed up, put it in there. Someone would crank the handle. It was just a good old hand crank, and out it would come, and someone would guide the sausage out, and another would gather it in baskets underneath, and it was kind of steep in here. And then we would all share it. And typically, too, it would be smoked. I think most everybody had it smoked, and there was a smokehouse up on the farm. Looked kind of like an outhouse. But that's where they smoked it. Got a little fire going in there, just enough to smolder. I don't know what they used to smoke it with. Probably some maple wood. I don't know. And then they would hang the sausage in there from the ceiling. And yeah, we've made it for decades now, and it's as I speak, I know I have some in the freezer in the room next to me, so it's something we pretty much always have on hand and just replenish each fall. Although, like I say, my hunting days are to the bite of the rock are long behind me. Like I say, I don't have anything against it, and my sons enjoy it. I just don't. Maybe some of it is some poor memories, hunting activity, and that's maybe another, that can be for another video. Let's just say that at the time of year when you're hunting is nasty weather. So, I guess maybe the only other comment, I was looking over my mic here at some notes. I live next door to my parents. He still raises a few cattle. That's typically where we get our beef. And every now and again, there is a calf that gets, for whatever reason, rejected from the cow. And my father's always had enough grandkids around. You'll see if someone wants it, because he doesn't have time with his occupation, to deal with a calf that's been rejected, because you need to bottle feed it, and it comes at a cost. And so I don't know what he would do with them. Probably just sell them to somebody. But my sons have done it, and they typically have named it. And I gotta say, that is something then, when eventually the animal is slaughtered, makes it a little bit more difficult. When you bottle feed an animal, it does kind of become a pet. And even if you have playful names for them, I think my sons named one of them Ribeye, another was Sirloin. But even when the animal grew up and was past the days, when they'd be bottle fed, you could still pretty much walk right up to them. And so when the mobile slaughter guy came out, it was really easy. The animal was used to being around humans, and didn't bat an eye, not knowing that he was the jig was up. So anyway, we are done with field number 12, and I am gonna cut the video here and bid you all adieu. See if I can do this without scraping the truck. And maybe next time I can show my handiwork over on the plane for where we dump the grain. So you all have a wonderful day. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.